Yang.
Hello, nerds!
Hello, nerds!
Hello, nerds!
Hello, nerds! So nerds!
Hello, nerds!
Now with this campaign, bang, dang, it's and Drew, come roll with the Yang Gang. Hello, nerds! Merry Christmas! Woo! Dude, it has been so long since I've done a live stream. We're actually going to go out with the family for a little post-Christmas entertainment. Nothing better than a little miniature golf. That's Brandon's favorite. But yeah, he's ready. He's ready to go. Brandon, do you want to say hi to the nerds for Yang Nation? Say hello, nerds.
Hi, nerds.
Yeah. Who are you supporting for president?
Andrew Yang.
Do you want to tell people? Do you want to tell people about our dinner, or do you want me to do it?
You tell them.
Okay. So for today's show, I'm going to give a quick state of the race. So we'll look at whatever polling data has recently been released. We'll look at Twitter. We'll look at Google, YouTube, betting odds, media coverage. And TLDR is, I think things are looking better, but they're not blowing up, but certainly encouraging signs. Let's say that. But before we get into the data, I just got to get something off my chest. We had a very intense Christmas dinner at the Nerds for Yang family last night. And it was intense because half of the Nerds for Yang extended family is MAGA. And so I decided I was not going to I was not going to discuss politics at this dinner. No politics over Christmas. But I was sitting next to one of my MAGA family members, and he brought up some political topics, and you know what happens. I mean, it takes great self-control not to engage in a political discussion in 2019 with the impeachment and the primaries and obviously the election coming up now less than a year, 11 months from now. And so I think MAGA family member was saying, I think it started with something quite innocuous, which was like, I love how they always refer like your candidate. One of my MAGA family members always says, your candidate, da, 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 da. They, for some reason, don't want to say his name. I'm not sure why. But anyway, they're like, well, your candidate wants to give money to poor people, and they're not going to want to work. And then another MAGA member said, that's communism. And I said, I was at a fork in the road. I was like, do I engage? I was like, Maverick. I don't know. I was too rushed. I was like, should I engage or not? And but I said, fuck it. Oh, excuse me. Brandon's in the room. Sorry, Brandon. I'll pay you later. I said, screw it. Engage, Maverick. So I said, actually, this idea was also proposed by Milton Friedman, who is a very famous Republican-leaning economist, a conservative. And he called it the negative income tax. And they said, kind of suspiciously, just like didn't reply. I think it's basically the comment of like they don't know if something's true or not. They probably haven't done a ton of research. And then I said, you could think of it as a negative income tax. It's not common ownership of the means of production. It's not even excessive regulation of the private sector. It's just distributing taxes that are collected from a value-added tax to every citizen equally. And then one MAGA member said, well, then people are not going to work. They're going to become, I think they didn't use the term, but I'm pretty sure they were thinking of the term welfare queens, because these are hardcore Reagan supporters as well. And I said, well, the data suggests that that's not true. You don't see in Alaska massive unemployment because people are getting a oil check. You see people work around the same amount. And then there are other studies that show that the only impact on people's likelihood of working are like new mothers or people going to school. And then one of the MAGA members said something very striking to me. This MAGA member said, well, I said, so I can send you that data if you want. I can send you the studies. And the MAGA member said, no, you don't need to send me that data. I won't look at it. And the other MAGA member said, this is all fake news. That was the beginning of the dinner. I think around that time we were working on our salads. So this is still very early into the dinner. Then of course, what came up was the current president, the good old Donald Trump. And I think, then at one point we were talking about Trump, and they were saying, do you think your candidate will even get the nomination? Again, I don't know why they won't say his name. They're like freaking MSNBC in some ways. So then I was like, to be honest, Biden is actually polling the best right now. So based on that data, he is most likely to be given the nomination. And they said, oh, ha, 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 Sleepy Joe. And then I said, wait, hold up. Because I was here with the nerdlings for Yang, Ryan and Brandon. And I said, Ryan and Brandon, I want to be very clear that even when we disagree with people, when we're talking about politics, we should really refrain from bullying people or name calling or marginalizing people based on sort of insults to their appearance or, how they come across. And so we're not going to engage in that. And because unfortunately, Ryan and Brandon started calling Trump names, which were, they were entertaining. But I felt like I don't want to raise kids who basically grow up just insulting the other side. Now, we're going to slip from time to time. I've caught myself saying some unpleasant things about Trump. But at this dinner conversation, I said, hey, I don't want this dinner conversation to kind of swirl into just name calling. I didn't want to degrade the conversation. I wanted to really have a thoughtful conversation. Devolve. Yes. Read my mind, R. McLuhan. I didn't want it to devolve. So, then there was a slight pause, and then they said, whatever happens, we're gonna overcome this witch hunt. And then I said, oh, witch hunt. And I thought to myself, I don't know if I should engage in this conversation about the impeachment, because I'm pretty sure I'm not going to change their mind. And I'm pretty sure it's not going to end up well. But I had to. I could not let that just lay there. So I took a deep breath and I was like, witch hunt. But you do agree that foreign powers should not interfere with our democratic process. Wouldn't we agree on that? And of course, they said, what are you talking about? Like, there is no foreign intervention. And this whole impeachment thing is just a farce. It's a coup. It's a travesty. It's a disgrace. Basically, I felt like I was reading Donald J. Trump's Twitter feed. And I said, well, don't you think it's inappropriate for the president to ask another country to help him do political opposition research in exchange for $500 million in defense aid that's been approved by Congress, especially defense aid that is meant to assist with repelling an adversary, the former Soviet Union, which I know you Republicans consider very dangerous. You can tell I was already getting fired up. And then they said, one MAGA, the most hardcore, he said he was just investigating corruption. You know, the president of the United States is the chief law enforcement officer. He has an obligation to defend the Constitution and investigate corruption. Why should we be giving money to these foreign countries? And I said, you are absolutely right. The president to root out corruption wherever it may lie, and especially if U.S. foreign dollars are going to the same country that will benefit from this aid. But I also said, clearly, there was, do you think it was a coincidence that of all the potential corrupt companies that President Trump could focus on, why do you think he focused on the one where Joe Biden's son was on the board of directors? Like, is that the only corrupt, was that like the most corrupt company in all of the world? I mean, we give aid to a lot of places. We're currently giving more aid to Israel than Ukraine, and the current leader of Israel is under all kinds of investigations, which he claims is a witch hunt too. But you know, that is what it is. And so they said, the most extreme MAGA said to me, it was just corruption, Tom. That's all it is. You're reading into it. I was like, no, wait a minute. You think well, can we at least agree that it is to President Trump's political advantage to have the Bidens under investigation? And then he said, no, it was just about corruption. And I was like, okay. That was a point in the conversation where I realized, like, there's just no way that, let's just call him MAGA 1, is going to relent. Like, if he can't even agree that dragging the Bidens through the mud and requiring the Prime Minister of the Ukraine to do a press conference announcing an investigation into the Biden family is not helpful to Trump, like, it's just very hard to have a dialogue. Then MAGA 2 came around. Meanwhile, the rest of the table was very quiet. I think it was a little tense. It was a little tense, I'll admit. So at this point, we're into the main course, and we're talking about the impeachment. And I said to MAGA 2, well, if you don't think the president did anything wrong, why won't he have Bolton, Pompeo, and Giuliani testify and explain what they were doing? Because isn't that like what they were complaining about the whole time that Pelosi and the House were in the impeachment inquiry, that they didn't have a chance to talk? So now it's in the Senate, which are controlled by the Republicans, which Mitch McConnell has agreed is being coordinated with the White House hand in glove. So now's your chance. And MAGA 2 said, no. you can't force people to testify. If John Bolton doesn't want to testify, that's his own choice. And I said, well, no, hold on now. I said, it's not his choice. He has been instructed by the White House, and all of those witnesses have been instructed by the White House not to cooperate. This was apparently news to MAGA 2, because MAGA 2 is like, no, I don't think that's true. I was like, no, the White House told them that they should not cooperate with the impeachment inquiry and they should not be witnesses. There's literally a court case now trying to figure out if the legislative branch has a right to request and subpoena witnesses from the executive branch in impeachment inquiries. And MAGA 2 is like, I don't think that's true. And I said, look, I can send you the press clippings that indicate that the White House has instructed Pompeo and Bolton to stand down and to not cooperate. And I said, do you want me to send? I can email them to you. And MAGA 2 said, no, you don't need to email that to me. Which is another one of those moments where I was like, wow, there's just no way that they will, we can't even agree on the facts, no less the logic. And then the other, and so I said, now this is where maybe I wasn't sort of getting a little fired up. So I said, let me just be really clear. You're mad because the House didn't call any Republican witnesses. And then MAGA 2 said, yeah, and also the White House lawyers were not allowed. It was a sham. I said, okay, so you're mad about that. You didn't have a voice. You weren't able to call your witnesses. You weren't able to have your lawyers. And I said, but now ball's in the Senate's court. You call as many witnesses as you want. You bring as many lawyers as you want. McConnell and the White House are working together as one team. So why won't you have them there? And then MAGA 2, gotta give her credit. She's smart. She threw two little hand grenades into the argument. Technicalities, but I have to give her credit. She's sharp. She said, well, Tom, there's no point in talking about this. No point in talking about it because Nancy Pelosi won't even send the articles of impeachment to the Senate. So who knows what's going to happen? Maybe he won't even be impeached. And I said, wait a minute, because Pelosi is sitting on the articles of impeachment, you can't tell me whether it's right that the Senate should hear witnesses or not. Why does that have anything to do with the other thing? Like, if you want a fair trial, then have a fair trial. The articles of impeachment are published. Everybody can read them. Have you read them? Of course, she said no. But she says, but I've heard enough about them. Because she does have a news channel on pretty much 24/7 by the name of Fox News. And I said, okay, so she said, number one, Pelosi is not releasing the articles of impeachment to the Senate, so who knows what's going to happen. And number two, we can't judge what the Senate will do. Let's just, she said this, I'll never forget. She said this phrase to me that sounds so familiar. She said, we'll just have to see what happens, Tom. We'll just have to see what happens. And I was like, oh my God, really? So we've devolved into whataboutism. Who knows? I don't believe your facts. They're fake. Let's just see what happens. And you're all communists and you're all traitors. So that was, Brandon, was that a good summary of our Christmas dinner? Woo! My God. And then at that point, like, we were ready for dessert, but no one really was eating a lot. Mrs. Nerds for Yang, she managed to retain her a little room for dessert. So I think she partook. I didn't even have a single bite of dessert because I was so frustrated because I basically felt like, wow, this is the state of our country right now, that we can't even argue about stuff we disagree over because we can't agree on a common set of facts. The facts were, and this is not opinion like, oh, was Trump, doing bad things or not. We couldn't even agree on whether Trump had instructed witnesses not to cooperate. We could not agree on whether the Senate should hear any witnesses. And we could not agree on whether the oil check in Alaska leads to unemployment or not. These are verifiable things that aren't really up for debate. They're not like, oh, well, my opinion is that Trump did or didn't instruct. I mean, this has been widely reported. Whether the Senate should have witnesses or not, like, that's a decision that the Senate has to make. And let's just see what happens. It's not a way to have a debate. But maybe they weren't really interested in having a debate. So now that I've purged out all of my MAGA dinner. So I think in the future, for these large family reunions, I am not going to discuss politics. That's BS. We know it. It's going to be hard not to, but we'll see. Now, I will give the MAGA team some I will say some positive things. So I want to practice what I preach. I want to be fair and balanced. I know that's a slogan for another channel, but I will say that MAGA 2 did say something encouraging to me. She said, at least Tucker Carlson was saying that Andrew Yang is not completely crazy. And I thought, oh, well, I'll take that. And then even MAGA 1, because he's an Asian American, was saying, well, it would probably be good for the country and good for the Asian American community to, for the first time, have a Asian American nominee. But then he said, but I don't want him to win. I want Trump to win. And then he said, but MAGA 1 and 2, which I won't give their names, but one is middle-aged man and another is a senior citizen woman. And I said, MAGA 1 and 2, I think the UBI and the freedom dividend would be beneficial to both of you. And MAGA 1 said, well, I would spend it wisely. I would use it for my retirement. I would use it to spend more time with the kids. I would use it to help with my retirement and relocation. And then MAGA 1 was saying, well, yeah, I would use it in the local community. I would probably go out to restaurants more. I would spend it in the city that I live in more. But they said, but that's us. The other people, we can't trust them. They're just going to all quit their jobs, or they're never going to get a job. All right. Well, that's enough for them. Okay. Now let's move on to some polling data, because we could spend all day talking about MAGA. All right. Let's see here. I'm going to just share my entire screen and make this a little easier. Hold on one second. View. Boom. Okay. Entire screen. All right. So here are the latest polls. Looks like there was a YouGov one released around Christmas, so yesterday. And you've got Yang at 3, ahead of Booker, Gabbard, Steyer, Castro, Delaney, Bennett, but behind Klobuchar, Bloomberg, Buttigieg. Ooh, Buttigieg at 7. That seems a little weak for him. That's interesting. Warren, Sanders. Wow, Biden at 30. So this poll, let's see here. This poll was taken December 22nd to 24th. So this would reflect, and when was the last, when was, hold on. What the hell? I think the debates, when was December debate? Was December 19th. So this poll would have been after the debate. Ooh. Wow, now I'm seeing myself speak. Okay. Well, joys of live streaming. Okay, so this poll would have been after the debate. And obviously we would have, let's be honest, we would have hoped for a bit of a bump here. This one was done by Morning Consult. And that one had us at 5. And that one was also done after the debate. So certainly nice that you see us stronger than Klobuchar in the Morning Consult poll. Remember, there was a time where Morning Consult, like, we were at 0. So we've come a long way. Number 6, right behind Bloomberg, according to Morning Consult. The thing about the CNN one that I wanted to share, sorry, the YouGov one, that I wanted to share was some of the more detailed stuff about who has a favorable opinion of Yang. And if you look here, you'll see that the top 2 rows are very favorable and somewhat favorable. So you see us 39% either somewhat or better with the Black community, and then 32% with the white, 31 with Hispanic. And in terms of very unfavorable, 1 out of 5 whites are very unfavorable, but very low unfavorability with Blacks. And then also a lot of room to grow with the Black vote, because only 54% are even aware of who he is. Only 46% have no opinion whatsoever. So you could argue that if you want to win the general and you don't want to do a repeat of Hillary, one of the things you need to do is you need to activate that Black vote that came out strong for Obama. And here you see that Yang has a very encouraging outlook with the African-American vote. Now, to keep it real, I also have Buttigieg's number. Now, Buttigieg has a reputation of doing badly with the Black vote. But here you see he does have 37% in the top 2 rows of somewhat or very favorable. He has 9% unfavorable, whereas Yang has 5% unfavorable. So he has about double the unfavorability, but it's still, single digits unfavorable. And a lot of people also don't know who he is. Now, with white voters, you see Buttigieg does pretty well. He's got about 30% in the top 2, whereas with white voters, Yang has 32%. So we're doing just as well as Buttigieg in terms of favorability. And in Hispanics, Yang has 31. Let's see Buttigieg. Buttigieg also has about 30 in favorability. So in terms of favorability, you could argue Buttigieg and Yang are very close. I was a little surprised. I thought Yang would do better with African Americans than Buttigieg, given Buttigieg's reputation with the African American vote and his troubles with law enforcement, fairness towards African American citizens. Let's look at ages. Where is Yang the strongest? We've got 38 for the younger set, 32 for the 30 to 44-year-olds. The 45 to 60, 31. Ooh, quite nice and even now. Remember back in the day, Yang used to be the most favorable with the younger set. Here we've got 38%, and it was like really low for the other groups, but we're catching up now, which is fantastic. That's super great progress. And then with Buttigieg, he does 26, 31, 30. Wow, 47% favorable or somewhat favorable with the 65 and older set for Buttigieg. Wow, the old people love Buttigieg. Jesus. 37% with the older folk, whereas with Yang is 35. Okay. Pretty close, actually. These two candidates are pretty close. Let's look at male and female. Male and female, you've got around 30 male and 30 female positive. With Yang, you've got 38 favorable for male and 30 for female. So Yang has way more male support relatively than female support. Although he has about the same amount of female support in terms of favorability as Buttigieg. So I would summarize the gender thing as they both do equally well with female favorability, but Yang does way better with male favorability. Now let's look at party ID. Oh, I want to keep showing you so you know who we're talking about. Here's the, this is Yang. So with independents, he's 31. With Republicans, 15. So independents, the sum of the 6 and 25 is 31. With Republicans, 15. Let's look at Buttigieg, who's known as a moderate. So he should do really well. 24 with independents and 12 with Republicans. 24, 12, 31, 15. So it's interesting that, you know, Buttigieg has this reputation for being a centrist, but Yang has better favorability with independents and Republicans than Buttigieg. Now, if you look at in 2016, who voted for Trump? 16% of Trump voters have a somewhat or very favorable view of Yang. That's 13 plus 3. Now let's look at Buttigieg for Trump voters. 12%, 2 plus 10. So I think we could argue that we are doing better than Buttigieg also with Trump voters. With Clinton voters, let's see, he's got about 30 and 40, so almost 70. 64 to be exact. Is that right? Is my brain working? Yeah. And then with us, 61, pretty close. So in summary, Jesus Christ. I've just been streaming this whole time and the screen share wasn't working. Oh, shiza. All right, here we go. Let me do it again. I'll do it real quick because it'll be the second time. Sorry, bros. Share entire screen. I know. Brandon's like, seriously, Dad? What are you doing? I had a feeling. Let's see. Share. Okay. So this one is the Yang one. Sorry, I'm going to do this real quick. Basically, guys, we're going to look at the top two rows, basically very favorable and somewhat favorable. So you look at Yang, you've got the first thing I would call out is around the age groups. He used to be really strong with this 18-29 and suck with 30 and above. And now we have nice equal distribution, almost equal, around 32 for the 30-year-olds, 31 for the 45-year-olds, 35 for the 65-year-olds. Still strongest with the 18-29 at 38. But it used to be like this 38 and like in the teens, if I recall correctly, for some of these other demographic groups. The other thing I would call out is the Black support is fantastic, 39. Favorable or somewhat favorable. Hispanic strong at 31. And with the African-American vote, 46% don't have an opinion yet. So they're still winnable. Now, I was comparing that to Buttigieg. So let me do a quick flip over to Buttigieg. Hopefully it's this one. Yeah, here's Buttigieg. Okay, Buttigieg, not that good with the young people, 26, with the 18-29 set, 31, 30, but 37 with the older folk. So Buttigieg is like the opposite of Yang in that he does stronger with the older folk than the younger folk. And then in fairness to Buttigieg, people give him crap for being weak with the African-American vote, but he does have 37% favorability with the African-American vote. He has 9% very unfavorable, which is higher than Yang's unfavorable with black voters, but it's not like when you read about it in the press, you would imagine that like every black voter hates Buttigieg. That's not true. And then with Hispanics, he's doing pretty well, 30. So very comparable to Yang. And then the other thing about Buttigieg is he's got about 30 and 30 male, female in terms of percent favorable for Buttigieg. Now, if we go to Yang, Chrome tab. If we go to Yang, now we're looking at Yang. Look at his male favorability, 38%, 30% for female. So both have about 30% favorability with females, but Yang has 38%. So 4 out of every 10 males who have an opinion, just 4 out of 10 males have a favorable opinion of Yang. Now look at the don't know number here for females for Yang. 43% of females have no knowledge of Yang, whereas 28% of males have no knowledge of Yang. So we still have a lot of headroom as more women voters become aware of Yang. So Yang has 43% who don't know anything about him. Let's see what Buttigieg for female. Let's see, here we go. So now we're at Buttigieg. 37% of females don't know anything about Buttigieg. So Buttigieg has a little bit more awareness with females than Yang. And then when we looked at party ID, this is Buttigieg. You got 12% of Republicans favorable and 24 of independents. So Buttigieg, again, is known as this centrist. So it's got 24 independents, 12% Republicans. And now if we switch over to Yang, you see nope, wrong tab. Come on, man. Is it this one? Okay, for Yang, you got 31% of independents have a favorable view of Yang and 15% of Republicans. So even though everybody likes to talk about Buttigieg being the centrist moderate, he's not as like out there as Warren and Sanders, Yang does better with independents and Republicans than Buttigieg. And then lastly, we looked at Trump voters. You've got Yang getting 16% of Trump voters. And what does Buttigieg get? Buttigieg under Trump voters gets 12%, 10 plus 2. So Yang does better with Trump voters than Buttigieg. Yang does better with independents than Buttigieg. Yang does better with Republicans than Buttigieg. Yang does better with men than Buttigieg. Yang does better with young people than Buttigieg. But let's keep it real. Buttigieg does do better with older white voters than Yang. But I don't think they're going to decide the election, frankly. Okay, so that was a little bit, sorry about the screen sharing mishap. Oh, my goodness. Oh, people were asking how many people were polled. So let me look that up for you while I've got the tables. There were, I'll go to the top. Come on, man. There were 1,500 people total polled, which is generally representative of a population our size, especially. I think the only risk is there might be some bias into who answers these polls. So you got to take it with a grain of salt, but it's better than guessing. Okay. So that was the polls. Now let's look at the search history. Let's look at search. Hopefully this will work. Boom. Boom. Okay. Google Trends. Here we go. So let's say the last 7 days. Okay, last 7 days. This is the average. You have Yang and Bernie being the most searched for, but I would say the biggest thing I would notice is how close Yang, Buttigieg, Warren, Bernie, and Biden are for searches. When you look at where people are, you've got Yang has great strength in the West Coast and Texas. Ooh, interesting. And then a little bit of the East Coast with North Carolina, Virginia. Actually, it's nice. And then Biden looks nice kind of in the middle of the country. And then Buttigieg. Buttigieg is very strong in Iowa, which is so sad because Iowa's a very small state, but has so much more influence than like this whole West Coast. And you know what? You got to give Buttigieg credit. Like he's playing the game. Obviously, he's strong in Indiana being his home state. And unfortunately, Buttigieg is also strong in New Hampshire. So these two tiny states that probably are a very small percentage of the national economy and population are where Buttigieg is having outsized performance. And then you've got giant states like Texas, California, New York. I would argue those are probably some of the 3 biggest states in the country when you count it by population and economy, where Yang has the most interest. Unfortunately, they are not going to determine the nominee as much as Iowa and New Hampshire will, which is kind of sad. But yeah, okay. And then in terms of what people are searching for when they search for Yang, they're searching for Wine Cave, who won the debate, there are actually some people are searching for other people and then arriving on Yang content. So that's nice. And then for Buttigieg, they're searching for Kevin Costner, Warren net worth. I guess that was the Buttigieg attack on Warren for being wealthy. For Warren, they're looking up for her quip about being the youngest female being elected. For Bernie, looking up I'm not sure who Eliza is. I imagine that might be his wife. And then in shorts. Oh, I think that was in Saturday Night Live. For Biden, stuttering. Okay. YouTube search. I believe that YouTube may represent more people who are seriously leaning into the election and interested in finding out what's going on. And here you see Yang crushing it for the last 7 days. The next would be Biden and Sanders. Very little YouTube search activity for Buttigieg or Warren. Look at this map. It's all blue, basically, and then Biden. And I think for Biden, it's a lot of people looking for, what are they looking for? His stuttering. Wow, a lot about his stuttering. Whereas for Yang, they're looking for his quip about the wine cave and the debate highlights, and then his post-debate interview, which is all great. So it's generally like we are still doing fantastic for web searches. In summary, very encouraging. If the internet is more representative of where voters are interested in, specifically Google and YouTube searches, then we're in really good shape. But freaking Buttigieg is also strong with this whole internet thing in Iowa and New Hampshire. The fact that Yang is strong in states like California, Texas, and New York really doesn't matter. Obviously, California primaries moved up a little bit this time, but you'd almost rather be stronger in Iowa and New Hampshire than Texas and California, even though the populations are so vastly different in size. Okay, now let's go to Twitter. Okay, let me share screen. I think it's this one. Okay, so here you see total followers. We are the red. The Yang is the red. And you see, basically, we're catching up on Buttigieg. Like if you look here, we were further apart than we are over here. So here he had 1.557 million. He had 1.6. We had 1.1. Here he had 1.1, and we only had 285K. So we were less than a third of what he was back as close as June. And now that we're in December, he's only about 40% more than we are. So that's fantastic. On the other hand, if you look at Warren, the purple, she had 2.5 million. We had less than 300K. So she had, like 8 times as much as we did. And now she has 3.5 times as much as we did, probably a little bit less than that. So we're closing in on both of them. And then if you look at like daily ads, you can see, wow, we had a big one on December 20th. We grew by 15,000, and they grew by 1,000 and 5,000. But if we go back, let's not cherry pick. The latest data we have is from December 26th. They grew by 1,428, and we grew by over 2,000. On Christmas Day, we grew by 3,000. They grew by 301.6K. So we are absolutely also doing very nicely on Twitter. And then I'm going to, it's almost 45 minutes. So then I'm going to just share a couple more things and we'll wrap up. Let's look at betting odds. So where is it? Here we go. Election predictions. This is the predicted betting odds market. You have us 1 in 10 chance of getting the nomination. Higher than Bloomberg, Klobuchar, Clinton, Booker, 10 times higher than Booker. And then you have Biden still being most likely, according to gamblers, and Buttigieg a little bit more likely than us, but not that much more. So that's encouraging. I will say that is one betting odds market. There is another one that shows us not as strong, but still roughly in the same order. And then lastly, I'm going to do media coverage. Now, media coverage, as you guys know, is something that I'm always pissed off about. But I actually think that we have some progress to report. So let me just share some data. Okay, so here is the network television news coverage over time. This is ABC, CBS, NBC news coverage, right? News mentions. And if you go back to like, let's say July or September, you see like Beto getting mentioned. You see Biden getting mentioned a bunch of times. Warren, Sanders, but you also see Yang is basically zero, right? Look at this. All the way through. Now we go in October. You look at the Yang line, which is right to the left of my arrow, about an inch left. You see 0, Yang 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0. Yang 0, 0, always Biden, and someone else, right? Yang 0, 0, 0, 0. But now, if you go all the way back to, let's say now the last one we have is December 24th. Yang still at 0, but Yang, I kind of felt like he did get a little more action to maybe December 20th. No, maybe the network news is still locking us out. Yeah, it's still Biden, Bloomberg. Buttigieg got 3. Why? I have no idea. Biden got 2 mentions on December 9th. December 10th, Bloomberg, Biden. December 11th, Bloomberg, Biden. December 12th, Bloomberg, Sanders, Biden. So in terms of network news, the Yang media blackout is for real. Although December 21, we did get 2 mentions. That's probably right after the debate. December 20th, nothing. December 19th, nothing. So that's the network news. So maybe there's not that good news for the network news. But if you look at online news mentions, we can come back here in August and you see Yang is where? Around 388 versus Biden's 1900. So about 15% of the top person back in August. But if you look over here, look at this. December 17th, Yang's at 397, almost 400. The top one is Biden at 3,400. So we are more than 10%. We're about maybe 13%. And then if you go here, December 22nd, you got Yang at 134, a little over 10% of the top guy. December 24th, Yang at 132, Biden a little less than 10%. So we're usually around 10% of the top mentioned person. But if you go back in time to say June, the top guy got 1675 and Yang got 93. So he got less than 10% in June. In July, the top guy got 976. Yang got only 260. Oh, actually, Yang had a good day on that one day. Wait, July 24th, the top person had 1,300 and Yang had 30. So like 3%. And then August, top guy gets almost 800. Yang gets 45, so 5%. So now we're getting around 10 to 15% of the top guy. You know, that's progress. I'll take it. I'll take it. Like, look at this. On December 16th, we got mentioned 582 times. Well, so 10% would be 300. 10% of 3,047 would be 300. So we're even almost 20% on December 16th. On 17th, we got more than 10%. On the 19th, we got more than 10%. Yeah. So online news mentions looking way more encouraging. And then do we have I don't have cable. I used to have cable here. Raw counts. I guess that's not available. Any rate, so I would say in terms of media coverage, we're still getting covered less proportionately than our polling would argue for and our donors would argue for, but it's not quite as suppressive as it used to be. So I think that's it for this state of the race. If you guys have any questions with the last 8 minutes, happy to hit some questions or topics you want to discuss. But let me just summarize while you're typing in questions, if there is any. One is MAGA conversations over Christmas dinner make it very hard for Yang Gang, or at least for this Yang Gang member. But it is what it is, and it just reflects the state of our political discourse. I would say ever since 2015, like my family's always been divided between Republicans and Democrats, but I don't feel like it was ever this bad. I mean, even with McCain and Palin versus Obama and Biden, yeah, it got pretty heated, but it was never at a point where we just couldn't even agree on basic facts. And it never got to a point where, I forgot one last thing that MAGA 1 said to me at dinner. He said, look, 4 more years, man, 4 more years. MAGA, 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 like that. And then the next sentence, he says, Tom, I don't want to talk about politics. And I was like, wait a minute, you can't say 4 more years. And then the next sentence say you don't want to talk about politics. So that's summary 1. Summary 2, the state of the race is, if anybody tells you that Buttigieg is more electable or would appeal to more centrists or Trump voters or independents, you can point them to the CNN YouGov polling data from the last week of December, and it will show you that Yang beats Buttigieg with men, young people, independents, and Republicans, and African Americans. Now, what do you need to win the general election? Young people, African Americans, independents, Trump, Obama voters. And I didn't even compare with Warren. Maybe next stream we'll do a side-by-side with Warren. But I think Yang will even do better with independents and Republicans than Warren will. So next, let me just jump to some questions, and then we'll be good to go. Okay. Who do I think will be next to drop out? Castro? Probably. What's the next question? When do we expect the latest polls? I don't know, man, but the amount of polling volume has gone down significantly. And what's interesting is this whole polling thing. I know a lot of the people out there like don't believe in the polls or they think the polls are imperfect, and I agree they are imperfect. But here's the reality: the polls are the ultimate yardstick for who gets into the debates. Now, you know from the last debate that Booker and Castro were not there, and you know what it's done to them. It basically makes them seem like they're not going to the playoffs, you know, like they're just not legit candidates. So debate access, which is the cousin of ballot access, debate access being driven by polls is a reality of the 2020 Democratic primary. And if there aren't enough polls, then you don't have enough shots to qualify. So you could argue the DNC, if they wanted to be really fair, should say, hey, you have to hit this threshold, and there needs to be at least this many polls, this many shots to hit that threshold. So if you took it to an extreme, if there's only one poll between now and the debate, then that's great for the incumbents, for the household names. It sucks for Yang. So I don't have the dates on when they're coming because I don't even know which ones they consider acceptable or not. It's kind of it's not super transparent. But I will say that if Yang doesn't qualify for the January debates, and it's partly because he's not getting enough polls, there aren't enough for him to even have a chance to qualify. I think that'll be a problem for democracy. I will also say that when there are polls and he is coming in at 3%, like, guys, that's on us. Like, we have to find a way. Like, of course, we can be angry about the fact that these polls are so influential, but we have to find a way to crack them. And I will also say that the Yang 2020 campaign, my understanding, I don't have any insider knowledge, but just from what I think Yang said himself publicly, they put a lot of money into Iowa and New Hampshire. And I'm not seeing like massive results in Iowa and New Hampshire polling. And so that says to me, like, we need to kind of think about different ways to influence these polls than traditional TV advertising. I don't know what that is, but that's my commentary. Did I tell them that 10+% Trump voters are voting for Yang? I did, and they basically were incredulous and said, "Oh, I don't know about that. I haven't heard that." They basically said I didn't hear about that a lot, and part of the reason is all of their news consumption is from Fox. Thank God for Tucker Carlson, because at least he at least acknowledges Yang and is kind of grudgingly admits that Yang can be reasonable. Okay, now let's see if there's any questions before we wrap. If Yang doesn't get to the polls for the January debate, do you think the DNC would even care that no minority candidates will be in the race? I think they'll care. I even think they might bend the rules to change who qualifies for January, or maybe change the qualification rules for February. But I also think the way they're going to bend them would be to get Booker in. And by definition, that will likely help Yang. But I think inside, they would not be okay with just Yang being the only person of color. What is Delaney still doing in the race? I don't know. What is Steyer and Deval Patrick? Why did Deval Patrick even come in? I mean, it's so strange why these people are doing this so late, you know? If we don't make the January debates, do you think that's it for Yang? No, I don't, because I feel like his support and his message is so strong that we can survive being excluded from one or even two debates. Whereas Castro and Booker, I feel like their support is so thin that if they're not in debates, like people will peel off. Whereas I think the Yang Gang's a stronger base. Thoughts on Biden Yang ticket? I would be okay with it. I would prefer President Yang, but I would take a Biden Yang ticket. Honestly, my biggest concern with the Biden Yang ticket is whether Biden will hold up in the general election or will he kind of step in it. Does Yang support Medicare for all or public option? He supports Medicare access for anyone, and which would include a public option, which is Medicare. Is canvassing critical? I think so, because I feel like the TV ads didn't really do it for us. I heard little rumblings of Trump running on UBI. I don't think he would ever do that because I think his supporters would likely interpret it as a handout and socialism. Now, as a thought exercise, it would be funny if Trump supported UBI and all of a sudden the MAGA people were like, yeah, this is the way it should be. This is America. We should all have a piece of the prosperity. Then I would be like, wait a minute, you guys were saying Yang was a communist, and now all of a sudden it's a great thing. So it would not surprise me. Like within my MAGA family, if Trump supported UBI, I think they would support it. Do you think our campaign is going? Absolutely. I think we're going to have a great fourth quarter fundraise. I think the search and YouTube and Twitter activity is real data. And even the polls, I think, coming up at 5% and 6% in some polls is pretty awesome. We used to be in the 0 to 3 range, guys. Now, that wasn't that long ago. Let's see. Do I think Yang will make it into the Yang? I think he will. I think he'll do it by the skin of his teeth, though, which will be very stressful. But it's kind of like the Seahawks, like nothing is guaranteed. Who do I think will drop out next? I think for sure, not for sure, but I think it'll be Castro. All right. So I think that was it for this stream. Thank you, everybody, for joining. Sorry for the screen sharing bug, but hopefully it came through subsequently. And Merry Christmas, everybody. Happy New Year. Happy Hanukkah. Happy winter holiday if you don't participate in any of those things. And just let's all just take a moment to be thankful that our candidate is in the top 5 in many polls, was one of 7 in the last national Democratic debate, is gaining ground and is winning over a more even demographic. It's not just young males anymore. And we're probably going to have a record fundraise in the fourth quarter, thanks to you guys. Speaking of which, if you're still here, I do want to remind you that if you go to tinyurl.com/NFY50, it is how you can donate to the Yang 2020 campaign. And all of it goes to Andrew and his campaign. But the Nerds for Yang channel gets a little bit of credit. We basically get acknowledgement. They count basically how much money the channel has helped raise. And that gives me the right to ask for more interviews with Andrew and other campaign insiders. So if you are in the mood to donate to Andrew, and let me tell you something, like he's going to need it because it's going to be a long stretch. And I will make another prediction. Like we may get to the Democratic convention and not have any candidate over 50%. And you know who's going to have the most influence is the people who are still having active campaigns. And do you know how we're going to have an active campaign? By having money in the bank, gas in the tank, and being a contender. Because I'm pretty sure Biden is not going to get more than 50%, and neither is Bernie or Warren or Buttigieg. So there's going to have to be a deal made. And if you drop out, like Gillibrand's not going to be part of that deal. Beto is not going to be part of that deal. But Yang could be. So donate to Andrew. Let's help them have a record raise this quarter so that we can hit Iowa and New Hampshire heavy. And in this case, I would probably say, hey, I don't think those TV ads really worked last time. So maybe we go heavier with canvassing. radio, online ads. But in order to do any of these things, the campaign needs some resources. So please consider donating. It helps my channel because then I can get more interviews and make more content for you guys about the Yang Gang. So with that, Merry Christmas, Happy New Year, Happy Hanukkah, Happy Festivus, Happy Winter Holiday. Enjoy time with your family. Try not to get into too many arguments with your MAGA family members. Hopefully you'll have better luck than I did. And let's make some history together. All right? Humanity first, brothers. Keep it real. Goodbye, nerds.